Hi, everyone. Hello, I'm Dr. Pooja Sharma from PACER, Patient Advocates for Clinical Research. And today we'll talk a little bit about understanding patient centricity. Now, what is patient centricity? Patient centricity means putting the patient first, listening to them, understanding their needs, and making healthcare work best for them. Now, each individual requires in different kind of care. Their needs may be different from another. So please design your trials with patients and for patients. Now, very important statement that I've often heard patients say is nothing should be done about me without me. Now, patient centric medicine is not really complete until patients participate not only in their healthcare decisions, but also in research that informs their such decisions. So, while we go to a hospital when we are sick, the doctor will ask whether you will want to do surgery or do you want to take clinical medicine for some time and then plan a surgery later date. There can be, discussion between the patient and the doctor. But that doesn't happen in the case of research. But truly, healthcare decisions are not complete till the subject becomes a participant and finally a partner in research. Now, what are the principles of patient centricity? Focus on the patient, not necessarily the process. First, listen to the patient, then build the process and the decisions around the patient. So first understand, for example, the eating habits. So when you say to the patient, eat high protein, we have to understand what his eating habits are, whether they're vegetarian, whether they can eat, what are their requirements, and whether there is a kidney function abnormality, what is the kind of protein the person must eat or not eat, and what are the food preferences before sharing a diet plan. Understand, not assume. Personalize and ask simple questions and avoid guessing. Sometimes we ask questions in which the answers are very simple. So we ask the questions which are yes and no answer. There is no, a real interaction in those questions. So be very specific. And instead of assuming that they understand the complex medical terms, and I'm telling you that as a doctor, many a times I don't understand medical terms from a different fraternity or from a different doctor. Please tell them in plain language and check. Always check if they have any questions. So, for all the clinical researchers or investigators or ethicists seeing this presentation, please ask them, did you understand? And if they say yes, they did understand, then ask them a follow up question specific to the protocol. Did you understand? How many times will the visits be done? How much ml of blood will be taken? What are the placebo or the control requirements? How long is the study going to be? Ask specific questions, and you may actually see that the understanding or the clarity which the patient has said is not so clear. Connect with your patient. Communicate consistently. तो हम सोचते हैं कि हमने we have standard follow up form, and that is the time we will fall. But sometimes the patients may call you. Create empathy. They may have a concern that they are calling the research coordinator for or the investigator for in a very busy day. But please remember to communicate and build trust. Show empathy at this time. Schedule follow up calls during recovery. Schedule follow up calls in case a person has missed a visit. Make sure that you connect with the human being behind the data set. Patient centric research finally will mean better care. And why will that actually happen? Is that patient centric research will have a result or an impact of improved patient care, and finally it will benefit all patients and it will benefit outcomes for all patients. Now, there are earlier, as a researcher, we've heard patient centricity being talked about at every conference, at any workshop, every conversation. It is patient centricity. But now the guidelines have made it very specific patient centricity. They have said, what do you mean by patient centricity? So ICMR as ethical guidelines advocate ethical and patient-centric research, and they have made processes of the ethics committee very standardized. They have ensured that there's auditing happening. There's processes that have been defined in ICMR ethical guidelines. The ICH GCP R3 guidelines, which we will study a little bit more in detail later, also put forth that patient centricity must be at the helm of doing research. They are suggesting patient advocates to be part of clinical research, a definition of protocol, making home visits and making activities much smoother. They have given options of direct to home clinical trials. They have also said that digital data collection can be done. ICHR3 has spoken about several activities that can be done to improve patient centricity. The Indian Digital Data Protection Act, the DPDP, also specifically asks for protection of data of patients. It also asks for specifically for consent from patients. It gives you a variation in consent. So consent is no longer just yes and no. You can give consent for certain activities. You can give consent for sample or not for sample. You can participate in a part of the study and not necessarily the whole. So it's very important that all these guidelines be kept in mind when we are interacting with patients. Now, for researchers, I would like to point out what is the practical patient centricity for patients. Consents should be done in simple, plain, and understandable language. This is something that we uh, have been emphasizing, and I'm sure you have too. But ensure that while you've given the paper out for them to read, and that sometimes may be in a slightly tougher language, sit with them and explain it in simple and plain, understandable language. It's a very, very important and the most empathetic thing that you can go and do for a person who's going through a difficult decision or a difficult life journey. Be friendly. The staff at the site must be friendly. A CRC who will show empathy checks how you feel. They don't just check the vital signs. So do ask, how are you feeling today? Make a pause. Wait for them to answer. Look at them while you are asking this question. Not look at the form while you're asking this question. Ensure that you receive clear answers to your questions. In case the patient is not being very clear or is ambiguous, please ensure that you ask simpler questions. The problems may be smaller. Ensure that you make processes easy for the patient. Ensure that the travel reimbursements are done easy. The appointments are done at a time when there's not too many patients. They can do it at a convenient time for the participant. And also keep giving regular trial updates to the patient. So the patient also feels being part of the trial. To continue with practical everyday patient centricity for ethics committees, we would like you to see that the patient material is clear and understandable, that this communication is available in a place where patients will actually access the clinical trial. So there are certain clinical trials for rarer diseases and people are looking for those clinical trials, but it's not easy for them to find if the hospital is actually doing it. Can this information be put out in a place where it is accessible to the patient, whether it be on a website, whether it be on a public notice board? Can you make that material, one, available, two, if see if it is clear and understandable? Definitely ask the investigator at the ethics committee meeting if patient convenience was considered during protocol development. Sometimes, there are visits which are scheduled at very close intervals or visits and there is no real, thought that has gone beyond to them beyond very clinical thinking. So we need to understand also that these are human beings who are running day-to-day lives. So ask these questions as you would for your own self. Recommend regular patient feedback collection during studies. Now, this is something that is very, very important, and ethics committees can emphasize this, that patient feedback must be collected, how the patient is feeling, and this is not an adverse event or a serious adverse event, but it is how convenient the patient is finding the participation in the study. How is the clinical research coordinator? Is there difficulty in getting the blood test done? Is there difficulty in getting the imaging studies done? So EC can ask the sponsor to rewrite a consent form, avoiding medical jargon, using visual aids, simple words so patients of all language can understand. For researchers, it's very important to understand practical everyday patient centricity by mm, primarily 3 to 4 things. One, involving patients early in study designs. So, if you are doing an academic clinical study, and I would request that even if you are doing this study as a part of your thesis, and it's not a very big study, it's a very small study of 30 patients, still in the designing of the data collection form or designing of the questions, please take 1 or 2 patient feedback to reduce hospital visits in the trial plan. Ensure the communication that is given out to the patients is personalized, right? The one size does not fit all. Ensure that whatever communication that you give out, and nowadays there's so much material that is available, is given in their language and it's understood by them simply. Respect the patient's time, preferences, and comfort. Ask this question. Many times, patients, and this happens even in clinical care, many times the doctor does not introduce himself to the patient. So please introduce the clinician, the clinical research coordinator, the clinical research nurse. Please introduce yourself to the patient as to who you are and what is your role and what are you going to be doing with the patient. Now, what are the benefits of patient-centric care or patient-centric research? Is of course there's better quality of care. Patient feels respected and supported, and therefore higher satisfaction, faster recovery, better emotional well-being, definitely smoother operations. Patients have, shorter hospital stays, fewer errors, staff is happier, patient experiences improve, right? So operations become easier. If you identify at an adverse event level, your serious adverse event reporting might not happen. The real world success, you know, uh, patient centric care is very, very important to improve clinical research and clinical real world evidence outcomes. So research में भागीदारी स्वस्थ भारत की जिम्मेदारी. Thank you for that.